In 2007, Stan Lee signed off of Fantastic Four for the last time. Thanks for joining me. My name is Daryl. I'm the host of Read Your Comics. Today I'm looking at the last Fantastic Four story by Stan Lee and John Romita Jr. Now, this came out around the same time that Marvel was doing a lot of books called The End, but for some reason they chose to just call this one the last Fantastic Four story and not The End. So there actually is a Fantastic Four The End that I believe Alan Davis wrote and drew. But that is not this book. And in fact, this isn't exactly what you would think it is based on this, the last story. You're going to think this is some in the future story, right? But it's not. It's kind of taking place in the 2007 timeline of the Fantastic Four, I guess, or thereabouts. But as far as I know, this is the last time that Stan Lee would actually write something for the Fantastic Four, unless he did something for like some kind of anniversary issue or something. Maybe he did a couple pages, but I don't know. I don't recall seeing it, so I can't say that he did. So as far as I know, this is the last time that Stan Lee wrote a Fantastic Four story. I think John Romita Jr. is a good choice to be paired up with Stan Lee in this. It kind of bridges that gap of, you know, the early Marvel artists like his father, Romita Sr., and what would have been modern artists of the time, even though Romita Jr. had been working in the industry for, gosh, probably getting close to 30 years at this point. But, you know, he was still a regular Marvel artist, probably doing Spider-Man at this time, that it felt like it was bridging that classic to modern gap. Overall, I think this is a pretty fun story that we're going to dive into after I remind you to subscribe if you haven't done so already, or if you just like these top-down, page-by-page, flip-through reviews of comics, be sure to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also, before you leave the video, be sure to drop a like. And lastly, if you are enjoying these Fantastic Four videos, I do have a whole playlist of them you can find right here. Now, another thing I'll say about John Romita Jr. working on this book is I don't think he's really done a Fantastic Four run. He's done a run on almost every Marvel comic book that there is. I don't think he's done an FF run. So, other than the FF appearing and some other run that he's done here and there, this might be one of his only Fantastic Four stories, which is a shame. I like John Romita Jr. I know some people don't like him really at all, and I don't get it because I think he's a great cartoonist in general, but I do like him. Um, just your general opening page, you have kind of like your description of who the Fantastic Four are, because this is just a one shot. Romita Jr. on pencils with Scott Hanna, who is a good inker on Romita Jr. Maury Hollowell on as a colorist, and this has some modern coloring to it, but I think it works pretty well with what Romita puts on the page here. The story starts off with a bird falling from the sky, and it's kind of the signal of the end of everything. Then we're going to see the Fantastic Four are stopping a terrorist group from trying to steal a bunch of nuclear weapons inside of this mountain. Just some basic action. This doesn't really play a big part in the story. It's just kind of like a introduction to what the Fantastic Four are up to at this time. And I'm telling you, it's not a future story just because the way the characters look. Reed just looks, you know, standard. Sue looks pretty standard there as well. Later, we're going to see little Franklin, and he's a little kid. So I guess you'd almost say this is even probably picking up where Stan Lee left the title back in the early one teens, I think is when he quit writing it. So it's probably even picking up from that point. There's not really any mention of anything current going on at this time, nor is Valeria in this. I like the Thing, the way he's introduced into the book. You see a little earpiece where he's talking to Reed. Coloring of the lettering here getting a little lost inside this. I look at these little hatch marks on the Thing right here, and around this time, Marvel was experimenting with coloring directly onto the inks because the printing technology, they were just kind of playing with it to see if inks were even as necessary anymore. A lot of Salvador LaRocca stuff was done that way, probably a little earlier than this even. Now, you know, Scott Hanna is inking on this, but I wonder if some of this was left uninked inked and letting the colorist kind of fill it in? Or did the colorist add that in himself? I don't know. But I do like it. It doesn't look bad, really. So the Thing and the Torch kind of wrap up all these terrorists, and this feels very Stan Lee-ish from the Silver Age too. You just see the Thing go in, and he's coming out with like a net full of knocked out bodies. And as they're leaving, they're kind of grumbling, or well, the Thing is mostly grumbling about how they don't get paid for this, more or less. That they still have to pay taxes, and the t-shirts and stuff aren't selling as much anymore. Anything they make goes to paying rent or into like their research and development. And they're just kind of feeling underappreciated and a little blue. At least the Thing and Johnny are. Sue and Reed not feeling that way so much. When there's all of a sudden some kind of an alert that Reed gets, and he goes into this room, and all these like climate change things are happening all at once, and they're kind of happening at like a rate that is unnatural for them to all be colliding at the same time. And at this panel I was looking at too, I'm wondering if these were like even different drawings that they then superimposed into the screen. I mean, they're drawing, and they're John Romita Jr. drawings, but the color makes them really pop off, and like they're jumping off of a backlit screen. So I was kind of torn by that. As were these separate little drawings that he did that they superimposed in? I don't know. And then the Watcher shows up. Great shot of the Watcher here. I really like this panel. Watcher kind of looking like more like he did in FF 48, 4950. Not the gigantic like circular head that he had. It's more Kirby-esque. I really like this Mr. Fantastic too here. He's got like a lanky body that even though he's not stretched, it kind of gives that stretching elastic feel even in his basic normal shape here. But the Watcher's going to introduce this, but the Watcher's basically come to say goodbye. And Reed Richards is saying, where are you going? He said, I'm not going anywhere. It's you who are going somewhere. And there's nothing you can do to prevent it. And then we're going to pan out to the far reaches of the universe where there is this cosmic tribunal assembling. And it looks just like this city of creatures, these alien creatures, which seem almost faceless. Everything's this kind of bright, washed out colors. And they are deciding that the human race, of course, is too warlike. They've had their few thousand years to prove themselves, and they're just too violent of a species to survive. It's kind of a trope, right? To have a galactic entity deciding, just judge and jury for the human race. So that's essentially what we're getting. And they're going to send this thing called the Adjudicator to basically warn the Earthlings that they have a week to put their affairs in order. So they're not just going to come and destroy the Earth like right away. They're kind of like, okay, you life creatures on this Earth, you get a week to kind of, be with your loved ones or whatever you want to do with your last week of life. And these shots of Reed as he's like seeing them come in, and all this feels very Lee Kirby-ish to me. It really does. So this entity, comes flying through space, and it arrives on Earth, and look how big it is. So we already have Galactus as a big entity, right? We got to go a lot bigger than that. Here's the island of Manhattan down here. And then this thing is really just made up of thought, is the big concept in here, that this tribunal, they're all just like pure essence of thought. That's what this Adjudicator is. And it can be in multiple places at once at this like ridiculously enormous size. And here it is in Paris and Moscow and even in the Himalayas. It has a very celestial type look. Now, Romita Jr. had done a Thor run at this point. So even though he has, very much his own defined style, he had been leaning into some Kirby influence a few years before this. And you're seeing it in this book right here as well. So the Adjudicator is coming to tell Earth what's going on, that the jury has decided they can't live and they get a week. And then the Adjudicator realizes, whoa, I'm way too big. I'm going to shrink down so I'm a little bit less intimidating. And you'll realize I'm not attacking or anything, that, there's nothing you can do to stop this. You just better get your affairs in order. This is a big event, so the Avengers show up, and most of the people around the world think this is a hoax. They're not taking it seriously at all, which is probably how people would take such a thing, I think. Knowing how the world works today, I'm on the internet, nobody believes anything. And we got to touch on all the other characters and what their thoughts are on it, of course. Spider Man, Daredevil, Professor X, they're all kind of giving their little 2 cents, but the best is Doctor Doom. How dare anyone try to destroy the human race before I can conquer it? So, typical Doom. The disappointing thing about this, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, is Doom does not play a big part in this last Fantastic Four story by Stan Lee. That is probably my biggest critique about the whole thing, is that I wish he would have played a bigger role, because Doom would see something like this and try to steal its power. That's what he would do, right? It's like Stan Lee kind of forgot what Doom does. I mean, Stan and Jack came up with it with him trying to steal the Surfer's power. Well, he did steal it. And trying to later we see him steal Galactus's power, the Beyonder's power. I mean, Doom is always trying to steal more power. So he would see this thing and say, how can I steal that thing's power? And then conquer the earth with it. Of course, Namor is going to show up. I like Namor here. This, sinew, his muscles and stuff rippling. Romita Jr. doing a good job. Makes me want to see a Romita Jr. Submariner series. I guess he hasn't done that either. But I don't follow enough Submariner to say that maybe he could have done a few issues here and there of that. But another thing I want to say Junior's good at is these armies of battling. He did a really good job with that in his Thor run, and he's continuing it on with the armies of Atlantis here. I like his little hovercraft thing for Mr. Fantastic is riding here, this hover cycle. More sleek and modern for the time, as opposed to the one that has like the arms coming off of it and stuff, which I love. I love that retro design too. This one definitely feels more of its time of this book coming out. But another good shot of Submariner here. Look at that flat head. I think that's something a lot of creators later on Submariner kind of got away from, is drawing him with that triangle shaped top head. So Reed is trying to tell Namor that there's nothing really he can do. And there's another good shot of that hover cycle he's on. And this is wild looking. It doesn't like raise an arm or anything, but it sends these tendrils out and smacks him down with no effort whatsoever. So then we're going to get a couple pages of everybody kind of taking their turn. Romita doing a really awesome looking gadget here as Reed is sending out a signal to contact Norrin Rad. Pretty awesome Silver Surfer here too. The only other time I think of Romita Jr. doing the Silver Surfer is in a Daredevil issue, which I have a video for right there. And this is a great pinup. And another thing I think that he really excels at is this quarter turned head right here. I think that's something he does it a lot. He does it even in this book a lot. And it's something he's kind of mastered. And this is a pose right out of that Daredevil issue he did with Silver Surfer. So Reed calls the Surfer to come in. Meanwhile, the Earth armies are throwing everything they can at this thing. Look at the way that it's like headgear thing flexes and stuff. Doesn't really show exactly what it did to the jets. I think it just made the engines die. So as the Surfer arrives and he asks like what's going on, and he says that he is aware of this tribunal. He knows what they're up to, and basically there's nothing for him to do. Finally, here's where Doom does show up. He shows up with some guns to blast it. And this is the most we get out of Doom. That's what I'm saying. He would have played a bigger role in this, probably trying to say that he's there to solve the problem, but really he's there to steal the power. And that's the one page we get of him doing anything, and he loses. And then the plot of this is pretty basic, I would say. The dialogue is pretty good, but a lot of this story is just kind of told through the pictures. I don't know if Stan didn't have it in him as much, or if Tom Brevoort, who's the editor on it, kind of reined it in, but it really seems like Stan did not go overboard with the dialogue like he would have done in his original Fantastic Four run. So the story actually moves very fast. And the big question on fighting this thing is, it moves with the power of thought, and anything it thinks of just kind of it does. One thing that gets a little repetitive in this is Johnny and Ben trying to attack this adjudicator multiple times, and each time failing miserably. Other heroes, they all come in and try, they all try to hit it at the same time, and of course, it's to no avail. The dialogue is a little corny here with Thor saying, his hammer didn't do anything. Cap's like, don't worry, my shield didn't do anything either. It's like, yeah, no kidding. If the hammer didn't do anything, Cap, your shield didn't do squat, right? And they're all like, my blah, blah, blah didn't do it, nor my blah, 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 or my blah, blah, blah. So kind of corny there with Stan, just kind of throwing in some extra dialogue here from each character. This is a pretty cool moment. You got to have the Inhumans make their appearance in the book. Everybody kind of makes an appearance except the Hulk. The Hulk does not show up in this. So because this adjudicator is in like all over the world appearing, which would make you think that either people think that these are separate adjudicators all over or what, but Black Bolt tries to do what he can against it, and of course it doesn't do anything. Romita does a good thing right here, looking very Kirby-ish in this pose, squeezed into this panel. I like that a lot as well. This is the coloring doing this texture and stuff. I think it works pretty good. A lot of more modern coloring I don't like because things start to get muddy, but the separations on it are good enough that it makes it pop. Although I think Romita's work looks best with a little flatter coloring. Like there's a lot of gradation in this faces and stuff that maybe isn't always the best with his artwork. Spider-Man showing up for a second to keep the crowd back from the FF because the crowd's getting antsy that the FF isn't able to do anything. Ben takes off to go be with Alicia. They're just all kind of giving up. When Reed's last gamble finally arrives, and it's Galactus. And this Galactus feels more Kirby-ish too. His head is a lot wider, his helmet piece. So both the Galactus shot and the Watcher shot feel like Romita was leaning more into Kirby's original versions of them versus how the characters how their looks kind of evolved over time. So hand it to Romita in this for sure for playing into some of that nostalgia because other than all of these cameos, I don't really feel like Stan tried to dive too much into the nostalgia factor of everything. So Galactus is kind of saying, I too know of this tribunal and you're cooked, is what he's saying. But Reed says he has an idea, and Galactus is just kind of curious because he's not a big fan of the tribunal either, I suppose. So it says moments later, and they're sending the Silver Surfer off into space to go do something. He stops to visit Shulabal because I guess he feels like this might be his last thing he does. And here's Johnny attacking again. So it's like they just keep getting these like hothead moments between Ben and Johnny doing everything they can to like throw all of their power at it again and again, and nothing works every time. It's that part of the story is a little too repetitive. They got a lot of pages to fill out, I guess. So they probably could have had the Avengers and well, you know what they should have done in this is that should have been Doctor Doom's subplot. Is Doctor Doom trying to spend a few pages instead of him just coming in with guns blazing, spend a few pages plotting to drain the power somehow. But you know, instead, Stan decided he was just going to keep having Johnny and Ben attack it over and over again. And after Johnny's failed attempt, all of a sudden the adjudicator says, the impossible has happened. And he starts to grow to its full size again and then vanishes. And they're kind of like, what happened? And the Watcher appears again. And if this isn't reminiscent of the end of FF 48, I don't know what is. So then the Watcher and Galactus are kind of explaining that the Silver Surfer went off into this other corner of the universe and found this race of mindless devastators and sent them to go take on the Cosmic Tribunal, who's all powered by thought. But since these creatures are mindless, which they could have used the mindless ones from Dormammu's land, I guess Doctor Strange could have pulled them out. Which they kind of look like the mindless ones a little bit. They've got that one little Cyclops eye, but they're aliens. So they go to attack the tribunal, which made them redirect all of their thought process away from Earth back to defend themselves. And they're happy that the Earth is saved. Ben shows back up. He went off to be with Alicia. I guess he either saw it on the news or something, but he shows back up. And Reed's like, "Well, that's great, but we can't just like send these other monsters to kill the one monster. So we need to go stop those monsters from doing that." And that's basically what they do. They load up in Galactus' ship. They go off to the Cosmic Tribunal, and you see the slaughter going on. See, they look like the mindless ones. And again, we get like this kind of battle scene that's reminiscent of what Romita Jr. was pulling off in Thor. Pretty cool splash page here. Galactus and the Fantastic Four fighting side by side. Good use of powers all around. You got Sue, who's barely done anything in this, of course. Stan Lee never wrote Sue well. He wrote her out of the book for a good portion, and he doesn't do her much justice in this either. But this is about one of the few times we actually see her doing anything. Still, it's a cool splash page. And they're able to fight off the mindless ones enough, which they fly off in their ships. And then the tribunal is like, okay, we're going to reverse course and not destroy your planet after all. Hooray, the day is saved. And you have all the other heroes here happy that the FF have saved the day again. Here's Franklin. Romita Jr. cannot do kids. He cannot do kids. Look at the giant head on this tiny little body and these arms. He struggles with kid proportions so much. There's Wolverine in his more, early 2000s costume. So that's what I'm saying. This isn't like a in the future, the last Fantastic Four story. This is a very much in the here and now, present day. They get their medals and stuff, and then you see even Doom is like clapping, but thinking about how one day he will destroy them. And it's kind of coming full circle with them getting the recognition they were grumbling about at the beginning of the issue, and now they've got all these medals of honor and so forth. And they decided it's time to pack it up and move out. So they're moving out of the Baxter building. They're packing everything up, shutting the lights off, and I guess they're moving and retiring on the moon. And that is Stan Lee's happy ending to the Fantastic Four. They save the Earth one more time and then retire to the moon. It doesn't straight out say that, but that's what they're flying up to, right? So I would assume that that's what they're doing. This is kind of neat because this is the plot that Stan Lee wrote, and it's got notes from Brevoort, who says at the top here, he says, "I've already run all my notes. I've already run it by Stan. He's approved everything." And then Stan wants you to give him a call before you get started. And it's kind of neat to see Stan's plot here. It's a few pages, and I kind of skimmed over it, and it's basically exactly what was in here. It's got a little bit of dialogue, a little bit of caption stuff mentioned in it, but not every bit of it clearly, because I mean, it's just a few pages. But that kind of gives you a peek into the Marvel method a little bit. Seeing this makes me think about the way it was probably handled with different artists, because we all know the stories of how him and Kirby and Ditko didn't get along in the end, how their relationships fell apart, basically because Kirby and Ditko felt like they were doing more of the writing than they were getting credit for, and probably so. I'm thinking Stan just trusted them more to take less and less plot and be able to do it on their own and took it for granted. But other artists like Romita Sr., John Buscema, um, guys like that Stan worked with, they never seemed to have a problem with Stan's Marvel method. And Stan was probably giving them more detailed plots, like in the back here, is my guess. Whereas he was probably just giving Steve and Jack, a simple phone call, a couple of paragraphs of like, let's have Doctor Doom in it again, and let's make him do this or that. And that was all he would probably give them, and then they would fill out the rest of the story. But other guys needed a little bit more direction, but still giving them that freedom to plot it out and pace it kind of the way that they kind of wanted their input in it too. So it's an interesting take. I like this book. I think it's a fun read. It's a nostalgic for Stan Lee kind of read. I like John Romita Jr. and I think he did a good job on this. I would have loved to have seen him do an FF run at some point. So while this might not be some kind of like integral top 10 FF story, even a top 10 Stan Lee FF story, I do think it has enough entertainment value to make it worth picking up. So there you have it, the last Fantastic Four that Stan Lee would write. Until next time, read your comics. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed my breakdown of this issue, you can support the channel by hitting subscribe. It costs you nothing and helps other comic fans find the channel. You can also visit readyourcomics.com for cool merch, like this. Read Your Comics isn't just a brand, it's a mantra. And when you wear a Read Your Comics shirt, you are helping spread the word. For more classic comics conversation, be sure to follow me on Instagram at read.your.comics. And if you're still here, why not watch one of my older videos? Here or here.